the really tough stuff, the stuff I hear about at home, the stuff that I know my partner loses sleep about. She was in child protection, she's now in family justice counseling. But it's men who have a practice of violence. That's the tough stuff. I don't think there's simple answers. I think it goes to their own traumas, their own pain that's being expressed. But when it's being inflicted on kids, we have a duty as a society to protect children from that. And the system doesn't always work for every child, but it's the best system we've got until we make a better one. So I think the challenge for child welfare overall is that some men could be an asset to the mother and child, but they could also be a risk. So it's the social worker's challenge to figure that out. When you look at the research, there's great stuff about father involvement. How to get fathers involved. It's been going on for 30 years. The two Davids have been certainly part of that longer and more productively than I have. There's also a whole batch of stuff, international literature on children who witness violence. We know lots of the effects of that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff on the treatment of men who batter. But, as these two authors mentioned down here, there's little research that considers men who batter as fathers. Certainly it's a subset, but it's the stuff that's the most challenging for social workers, the potentially most challenging and damaging for kids. So social workers need policy training, skill, and time to engage with fathers in child welfare. There's little of any of these at present. They also need guidance to know when a father involvement is not in the best interest of the child and is dangerous to mothers. Sorry to be the spoiler on father involvement, but I think I wanted to communicate to you today sort of the complex reality that social workers in the child welfare field live with. Safety of the child, well-being of the child. Yep, there's all kinds of traditions of not seeing fathers. There's all kinds of wonderful work being done in this room to coach fathers, to include fathers, to work with fathers. It's incredibly important. There's some really complex situations that I know social workers across this province lose sleep over, and that's around violent, abusive, and dangerous men who are in the lives of children and are potentially generating another generation of those same conditions. Fundamentally, I think fathers need space and opportunities and support to reflect on their behavior in intimate relationships, to heal from trauma, and to become positively involved with their kids. And there's lots of good ideas and resources and knowledge in this room. And the hope of that is better ongoing relationships that they can have not only with their kids, but their grandchildren, and if they live so long, their great-grandchildren. Thanks very much. I better check.
We're taking questions.
How about one?
One, okay. I appreciate what you're saying about the challenges of social workers in that field. It's a really difficult field to work in. I do have some concerns about how you're labeling solely men as the abusers in domestic violence. Because all the studies that I've seen basically say that domestic violence happens relatively equal between men and women. And my perspective is that there's a lot of different ways of defining what violence is. I mean, it can be anything from physical violence, verbal violence, psychological violence, parental alienation. There's a huge range. Right. So you know, what I see you doing, maybe inadvertently, is typecasting and sort of perpetuating the stereotyping of men as abusers. And I have some concerns about that. Also, the research that I've seen is that children are actually more at risk from being abused by mothers than they are from fathers. Now, I think that statistic might be a little skewed because there's more single mother families than there is single father families.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not questioning your intent and some of the knowledge that you're trying to bring to us, but I do have a huge concern about perpetuating that stereotype, particularly in this room.
Well, I guess I'd respond to that by saying, you know, abuse and violence isn't limited to one gender. Neither are addictions, neither are mental health issues. So they can occur to kids from both parents, right? Or both genders. So no debate about that. What I wanted to put on the table, though, is when I look at my field and my profession and my colleagues in the field of child welfare, primarily women working with women, and what are some of the reasons that men are not there in the practice, in the client group? Well, I think part of it is that some of the men in child welfare involved families are pretty challenging to work with. And some of that relates to their issues, their pain that gets expressed through control, through abuse, through violence. So you're right, I made a choice to focus on that because although it's uncomfortable, I see part of my role here today is to interpret what's going on in the field of child welfare. And so on the one hand, there's the whole very positive theme of father involvement, which I want to support and encourage. But I'm also cognizant of the realities that my colleagues work with, which places a number of cautions on that. So I don't want to say, if I've given a misperception, I don't intend to. I simply want to bring before you that there's some countervailing forces that might limit social workers wholeheartedly embracing the notion of father involvement. Because there's this undercurrent, and a significant undercurrent that they need to work with to assess the safety for children. In general, I don't think they're getting training support. So more experienced workers, they know how to deal with people who present difficult behaviors and work through that and create a really positive crisis out of the intervention of a child welfare social worker and make some change. Less experienced, untrained, or less trained workers, less experienced, don't. So I think it's a partial answer probably to that question.
You know what, thanks, Chris. I will be ruthless a bit and cut it off there just to make sure we carry on. The thing I wanted to say though is just to thank Chris is, you know, how we can use this information. Just in the sense that I don't think there's anybody here that's a social worker. Is that right? Okay. I guess the way that I think we can use this information, this research, is by when we're working with families who have a social worker, who are involved with the child welfare system, that we're the advocates. If we know that there are these biases, we know that there's a lack of training, we know really, you know, better because of this research, we understand a little bit more about the challenges and what the tendency of social workers might be is to push the father further away, ignore him, not try to contact him. So I think our mission then is knowing all of that, is that we might have to talk to the social worker, we might have to be the advocate and say, hey, you know what, this guy has potential. You know, there's been these problems, there's things that we don't like about him, but let's find out how he can be involved and you know, make him a part of this child's life. So I think that's the message I take. So, thanks.